Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 14th edition of Red Shoes Talks by Simon Lehmann of AJL Atelier. Today, it's a great honor to actually touch on a topic that is important to the entire world and the entire population. Just recently, actually this week, IPCC has put out the latest report on climate change. The outlook is very bleak. And we in the vacation rental and travel industry at large have also our responsibility to make our contribution to make sure that we can stop global warming if at all possible, so we can continue to travel and explore this incredible world. But there is a lot of work to do. Now, in order to give some practical advice and see how climate organizations see the current situation, what we can do in tourism, today I have two wonderful members of the industry joining me in Red Shoes Talks. First of all, it's Bob Garner. He's an owner and an environmental advocate, and his vacation rental company is called Casal by Fichi. Second, I have Stephen Neff, the CEO of My Climate, based in Switzerland, who is a carbon offset foundation, the largest carbon offset foundation in Switzerland, of which I'm also a proud board member for the last 6 years. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. It's an honor.
Well, good to be here.
So I want to start jumping right into it, and maybe start with Bob first. IPCC report came out. You have been very conscious on environmental impacts in tourism and everything else. Bob, just explain your role and what you do within this entire topic that we're covering today.
Sure, yep, and thanks for inviting me today. It's great to be here. Me and my partner run Casal di Fichi, which is 6 environmentally sustainable holiday apartments in Lehmann, Italy. And because we've been involved in that topic for all these years, we've tried over the years to improve our offering to our guests in terms of what they have and how environmentally friendly that is. We don't claim to be perfect. It's a journey. We're all trying to improve as we go along. But I've found that having that audience of people I can talk to, several hundred guests a year, and the influence that I can have with them in trying for them to go home with a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more understanding so that they can have more of an impact in their private lives, I got to thinking that how could I do something bigger than that? And so for the last sort of 5 years, I've been working and talking in the vacation rental space about the intersection between the climate emergency and vacation rentals, and what vacation rental owners and property managers can do and need to do to make a difference. Because as you've mentioned, we're in a critical situation now, and we need everybody in the world to get involved, whether you're an individual, whether you're a business, whether you're a country. It doesn't matter. We need engagement across the board, and I'm trying to play my small part in educating my sector to step up and take some action.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob, and that's great news, and we'll definitely learn more about consumer behavior and expectation later, because that's something I'd love to touch on to see how much is that in demand and what you can do also with supply of vacation rentals, and then how much we have an impact there. But I want to move on to Stephen for a second. And Stephen, please, could you introduce to the audience what My Climate is all about, and where you can support the tourism industry on the topic we're discussing?
Yeah, gladly. But first of all, thanks also a lot for having me here. My Climate is a household name in Switzerland and also in Germany in the meantime. And what we do is we actually try to support people like Bob who are trying to make a difference. He says it's only a few hundred people that he has contact with. Well, if you have 1,000 of those people, you're quick at a couple of million, which can make the difference. My Climate, we started off actually as a spin-off out of the Technical University in Zurich. Started off with a few people just thinking how they can actually do something to mitigate climate change on the one hand on the technical side, but on the other hand also how to offset some of the emissions which were coming as a not a permanent solution but as a temporary solution. Out of those few people, we've developed into an organization which at the now we're running at about almost 120, a staff of 120 people, engineers, scientists, marketing people, but also a lot of people, as you mentioned, on the education side, trying to inform people what they can do to mitigate climate change, be it in industry, be it in the tourism business or in the vacation rental business as well. So we're very widely set up. So we have really three parts of our business. On the one hand, we do consulting for organizations, companies. We do offsetting, but we also do a lot of education of children, but also senior managers in multinational organizations.
So the way I understand it is that My Climate is a foundation. So you get support given by institutions, by individuals, to basically support carbon offset projects. Are you developing your own projects? Can you make some examples on what kind of projects My Climate is supporting in terms of carbon offsetting?
Mm-hmm. We have at any moment in time between 100 and 150 projects running worldwide. They can be located in Africa, they can be located in South America, North America, Europe, a lot also in Asia. We work with local partners to develop these projects, usually exclusive projects which we develop with our local partners. And they can range from blue carbon, that is sequestering CO2 through the use of weeds, mangrove forests, or right on through introducing efficient cooker stoves in Africa, where you reduce the amount of wood that's being used and burned, and inadvertently then or directly a reduction in CO2. We also do other more high-tech supporting projects, for instance, solar systems in Africa. We see that there's a wide abundance now, of course, of mobile phones in use. They all need electricity. And instead of those all being run by diesel generators, we make new projects there, installing solar systems very locally in those villages to make sure that the diesel generators aren't even bought in the first place, as an example. Other big projects which we have may involve the efficient planting of rice using less water, less energy, and also there a reduction in CO2 indirectly, just as an example.
Absolutely. So there's countless examples, and obviously in tourism as well. And now, maybe to start off with, to sort of move towards tourism and then also hospitality. I mean, a lot of companies are now on the pressure to do more carbon offsetting, and they either do it themselves or they're actually invest into carbon offsetting projects to compensate their own footprint. Can you explain or maybe tell some use cases that you have developed in regards to tourism, hospitality, maybe even airline industry, so we can sort of cover that loop?
I think the loop is a nice word, because I think we got to take a step back first. Before you can do any sort of offsetting or compensation, you really have to calculate your carbon footprint. How much CO2, what's your baseline? And that's where our specialists come in. They do these calculations right down to, for instance, the food that's being used, how much energy is being used to heat, other systems which are in place in the hotel, but also, let's say, the travel which is being done to the hotel, away from the hotel. And there we help organizations, be there a hotel chain. Youth hostels, for instance, we're very active there. So we do a baseline calculation for them, and then we work with them to say, how can you reduce your CO2 emissions every year? And that which can't be reduced initially, because you also have capital investments, which take time to also amortize. You just can't rip out, for instance, your oil heating overnight. So of course, what you do is use the compensation to exactly compensate the emissions for that time before you can do the big capital investment. That's where the compensation comes in. But first you have to have a baseline, and then you have to work out a reduction plan, and that difference between the reduction plan and that which you can't offset, that you can then compensate through one of these projects which we may have in Africa or in Europe. And what we try to do is we always try to find a project which fits to the customer. So very often we may have somebody in a hotel which says, well, actually it's very important for us, the oceans. So they may then invest in the compensation project, which is dealing with blue carbon reforestations, for instance, of mangrove forests somewhere in Madagascar.
Absolutely, but the hotel can also reduce the carbon footprint themselves, and that's where I want to go back to Bob in terms of baseline calculation. So baseline calculation, we need to understand what is my own baseline in terms of carbon, and what can I do actively to reduce that. Now, Bob, if I'm correct, the properties that you manage, you own them, right? So yes. You basically say what's happening in that property and what is not happening in that property because you own it. But in all due fairness, you all know vacation rental at large is in secondary home ownership. So property managers who manage inventory do not own these assets. Actually, somebody else owns it. So how can we sort of make that link close in vacation rental, Bob? You as a very active advocate for environmental change in tourism vacation rental, and how can we build that bridge, and what role do you think that a MyClimate could change in that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Obviously, there's a lot of property that's being managed by property managers, and they don't have the control that I have over my stock. But they do have a lot of influence, because we know that property managers that have come on board and are starting to make clear plans about how they're going to reduce their own carbon footprint as a business. They're setting a leadership role for the owners of those properties to then follow. We're seeing that clearly through the Booking.com survey that comes out each year, which is fascinating. And they've been surveying for a number of years consumer expectations and observations about what individuals are looking for. And we look at the particular stats, and they've shown really clearly that what consumers want in terms of more environmentally friendly holidays, including where they're staying, has gone up and up each year. And just to give you one stat from this year's Booking.com survey, they said that 49% of people felt that there weren't enough sustainably managed properties, and that 53% feel annoyed when they go and stay in a place where there isn't some sustainable activity taking place. So we know that there is consumer demand, and of course that is going to increase exponentially over the coming next couple of years. So hosts is going to start to learn that they need to do more if they want to continue to attract the greener traveller, which is a very growing market. And property managers are also starting to understand that they need to attract people too. So that the very forces of the market are going to come together to make these changes easier for people to see that they need to do and to implement some changes. And that's what I talk about all the time to property managers and hosts. But of course, it goes wider than that. It goes to everybody in our sector. So every organisation that's providing a service to the vacation rental movement, including yourself, Simon, has a role to play in terms of how you manage your business, the impact that you have on the planet, and the leadership role that you take in the wider vacation rental world. So I think anybody in vacation rentals, whether you're a host, whether you are a manager, or whether you're a supplier, has a role to play. And we're now starting to see that that is becoming a really important topic. So for example, I do no longer work with businesses who don't have some environmental sustainability built into their business. When I'm working with people, My question is always, let me see your environmental statement. I don't see anything on your website. What's your plan? What's your approach? And if they say they haven't got one, I said, well, let's talk again when you've got one. And that's how you can also make change. Of course, I'm a tiny, tiny business, but other businesses have the power of leadership and the power of money. And you can start to influence people in the market by using that carefully and constructively. So I think there's a lot of changes that are coming down the line, and it's quite an exciting time.
Thank you, Bob. I want to pick up on the booking study and throw that one back to Stephen, who's obviously deep into a lot of data and everything else in terms of consumer behavior as well, and related to tourism. What's your visibility on that, Stephen, and what does that say to you in terms of even airline compensation and others, or consumer behavior in general within tourism? What do you see on that one as microclimate?
What we definitely see, and I can concur with what was Bob saying, is definitely a strong interest in the topic of sustainability within the, I'm going to say, in general, hospitality and tourism business. I think it's always been there in certain niche markets. They didn't talk about it a lot, though, for what reason? It wasn't really on the radar screen. Now what it's become mainstream. And I like the word that you were using. The customers aren't demanding it, they're expecting it. So it's sort of like, you don't really need to hang up the sign anymore to throw your towel on the ground if you want to change. People know how to behave. And I think that's what they're also expecting if they're coming to a place, that there is some sort of sustainability project running within the hotel or the vacation rental unit. They expect that. On the other hand, I have to say there's also a big gap between other organizations or other forms of tourism where it's really not an issue at all. And I think that's a bit of what is a bit of a fine line, that some very, very good initiatives that are being done can also be used by others just to jump on the bandwagon and say, well, we're also green right at the moment. So you really have to look carefully at these organizations. Which standards are they using? Did they make up their own standard? Or is it really an international standard where you really say somebody comes around and audit? And there we see a huge difference there in the quality. And I think that really makes the difference. Does it make an impact? Are the standards being adhered to? Is there even a standard? And it isn't an accredited standard. And if you got those things, you're really on a good way. And people will notice things like this, because people will check on their mobile phone quickly. So what kind of standard is this? What is this? And if it doesn't look serious, they go, well, this is a bit odd.
So what does that mean? That's an interesting one. So we don't do corporate social responsibility for marketing purposes. That's what you just said. And I could not agree with you more. We see that too often. And then as long as there's a little green leaf on a piece of paper, I think, yeah, that's all good. They do something about it. I totally get that. But action is different to a label as well. Yeah. So now, first of all, I want to talk to you about a use case. So maybe you've worked very closely with youth hostels in Switzerland who have been very conscious of taking immediate action as a hospitality provider. Can you elaborate a little bit on their activities? And then my question would be then to Bob, how can we translate some of that into our own industry?
I think it's very nice to start off with the youth hostel, because you associate the youth hostel with very inexpensive places to stay. And it's amazing what they've done. They start with the food, the packaging, the coffee, where they're getting from, the energy sources that they're using. And when they invest in a new youth hostel, everything is just state of the art. So it's an integral part of their DNA. Very easy to do if you're building a new building, and a lot of youth hostels are being redone, and it's really amazing what they've done. On the other side, we've got a chain of 5-star hotels, which are absolutely spectacular, and they've dedicated one room within this hotel just to the topic of sustainability, environmentalism, what they're doing, and you can physically see what they used to have, what they have now, and how they're changing. So you have now two different target groups. On the one hand, say, like I was a few years ago, the backpacker going through Europe, staying at the youth hostel, But on the other hand, you go to the 5-star and you've got really the same message coming across to 2 different target groups, but they're really approaching it the same way. They're really taking action. They're making very, very precise decisions on who they use as a supplier, as Bob was mentioning. And if the supplier doesn't meet their requirement, they're not used. And that really makes an impact.
So Bob, coming back to the point we said before, I mean, I could not agree with you more in terms of activating network, raising awareness. I mean, that's something we definitely can do and need to do more. But let's jump that bridge already and say, okay, we're there, and how can we make concrete initiatives, in terms of analyzing that. So we know the consumer requires it. So that box is already ticked. And I think the booking report shows that very clearly. But we as an industry, I can say we do little to nothing about this. I mean, I'm a vacation rental user, platinum member. So far my experiences have been nothing to zero in terms of sustainability, where I ever say that the property manager or the owner has done anything about it and communicates it as such. Interesting, today I saw a post from Altido, which I commented with your names on it, because Altido said, we've just planted 200 trees in Cameroon and we want to do something about it with our owners. But it's already, the awareness is there now, but I want to translate to the buildings. Interesting, I found from Stephen's point of view that with youth hostels, it's not just the insulation of the house, the air conditioning, the heating. It's actually a lot more. It's the DNA. I love that. So it needs to, the fish always thinks at the head, right? And second is it's everything else we're touching, in terms of washing liquid we use for our linen, where we source our linen, where we source our consumables, how they're sourced. I mean, there's so many things within the value chain of what vacation rental has got to offer where we can actually make an impact, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I write about this all the time, and I've written a number of proposals for hosts and property managers that they can take a 10-step roadmap to take them from where they are now to where they need to be environmentally sustainable. And maybe we can put a link in the show notes to that at the end.
Absolutely.
Public, it's there for everybody. It's really easy to use. Most of the initiatives don't cost any money, and some of them will actually save people money. So that's great. But why don't people do it? A couple of reasons. Property managers and hosts are really busy. They're trying to be successful. They're trying to keep their head above water. They've got 1,000 things they're dealing with. They're juggling all these balls. And unfortunately, environmental sustainability just doesn't always come to the top of the list, even though they may think it's important, because there's just so much going on. So one of the things I try to talk to people about is, it's not about having a successful business and then being environmentally sustainable. I mean, I can prove through my business that I've got environmental sustainability baked through in every point of contact in my organization. There's nothing that we do that doesn't have an environmental focus. Now, of course, we're a bit obsessed with it. I don't expect everybody to be that obsessed, but I can certainly say that you can be a successful business by baking these environmental initiatives into your business, because that is not going to mean, it's not about whether you make profit or being environmental. The two go together, and you can be very successful by doing that. And I think that's one of the barriers that people feel is like, well, I can do all this environmental stuff and, this tree hugging and be really green, but I'm too busy trying to make money, as though you can't make money by being green. So I would say one of the things that people can do, other than reading that report that I've already mentioned, is also consider signing up to Tourism Declares. I'm an outreach coordinator of Tourism Declares. Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency is an organisation of many hundreds of professional businesses in the whole gamut of tourism, not just in the vacation rental world. And their purpose is essentially to find a best practice, to put it together into a plan that any individual in vacation rentals, for example, can take it and use it and run with it. Because what we're finding is that people don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. They don't know which measurement to do to find out what their current carbon emissions are. They then don't know what to do to reduce those emissions. They're confused about all the different standards, all the different green labelings, all the different consultancy. And so what happens is they have inertia. They don't take action. And that's the thing that we've got to break, that cycle. But by being a member of Tourism Declares, a free organisation, no cost to it whatsoever, you're in a community where people have already taken those steps. So you're following behind somebody who's already done it, and you're not having to learn everything from first principles. It's also a good initiative because it isn't just a label that you put on, it's something public. You give a declaration to say that I want to be part of a solution rather than part of the problem. And over a year, I'm going to develop an action plan, which is going to take me from where I am now to where I need to be. But at the point of making that declaration, when people join, and I talk to people every day about it, you don't have to know anything. You don't have to know any solutions. You just don't even have to know what all the problems are. You're just putting up your hand to say, I want to be part of the solution. And over the coming year, I'm going to find out what I need to do, be guided by others, and put that in place. So I think it's a really great solution because it doesn't expect you to know anything or do anything on day one. It's a learning point, and we're all going through that, and people just follow in the footsteps of people who've done it before them. So I would encourage people to look at Tourism Declares or contact me, and I'll happily chat to them about it.
That's good to see or hear that you're not the activists who are clamping themselves on the side of a vessel, because I think I'm not sure if that is too impactful either. So, we need to have a bit of a laugh about this. I mean, not laugh. I mean, I'm taking obviously it's very serious, but we can have a giggle because you said, activists sometimes also don't get to the result, but they at least make noise, and it needs different facets in the business, right? So don't get me wrong, and I think that's very important. And one thing I hear out very clearly, and I like what you said, at the end of the day, I can take one plane ride less, or I can leave my car in the garage for 2 weeks longer than normal, and I've already made an impact. It's actually not that hard, right? So I think, and I always say, life, having gone through life myself for a few years as well, and I know that life changes only at your nose tip, right? And it's not the neighbor who has installed, the thermal heating. It actually I have installed it. So I made an impact, not the neighbor, and that gives you already a better feeling too. So you need to start with yourself. But I want to throw that back at Stephen in terms of an organization. So My Climate, as you heard, ladies and gentlemen, My Climate is a very, very well-known address in Switzerland and does an enormous good job in educating. Also, everything starts at education, and Bob just alluded to that. So Stephen, throwing that back at you, what contribution can My Climate play in the challenges that Bob has just alluded to us?
Well, I mean, it's not what we can do, it's already what we do already now. And I think just to give you a couple of figures, starting off with school children, I mean, that's not really right at the moment the target group for you, but wait in 10, 15 years, they're all going to be traveling as well. And there we've educated almost 50,000 school kids to the topic of climate change. And we work very closely also with them in projects like how do you travel? How do you go to your vacation place? Do you go by airplane? Do you go by train? Is there an alternative? Should you go longer? And they're very, very simple things. And I think Bob put it out very nicely as well. Some people just don't really know where to start. And once they start, they realize it's quite simple. That actually, for instance, the trip is part of the experience. It's not just getting you from point A to point B, but it's part of the experience. And there we highlight this, for instance, to youths. That's actually part of the fun part as well. On the education side, where we see the levers right at the moment, and I think maybe that's something which, with the IPCC report which came out, it comes out of it, just time is running out. And the people who are making the decisions now is our generation sitting at this virtual conference, and not the 12-year-olds. And there we're placing a lot of emphasis on training managers and the decision making them aware what climate change is and where you can start. It could be just something really, really small, replacing the heating. improving installations, or actually activating the apprenticeships in these organizations to come up with great ideas. And really, they come up with ideas which any manager should have seen as obvious because they save a lot of money, but it's the apprentice that comes up and says, well, why don't we do this? And that's where we can really activate the young people, but also managers, that they can make a difference. And I like what you were saying, where I said it's a bit like eating potato chips. You just can't stop once you start it. You know, if it's not in your DNA yet, you eat enough potato chips, it won't be in your DNA, but you know, it'll have an impact on you. And sooner or later, you look at everything just with say, well, that darn light up there, why isn't it an LED light? Replace it.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting point. You just gave me an interesting one, to the point that Bob has mentioned before. You know, what is this with this light up there? It's not an LED light. I mean, that is related to potential energy savings, right? But at the end of the day, it's just literally not taking care of it, and spending that money. I mean, I'm flabbergasted by the properties I've stayed in. Just, you know, we don't even need to talk about sustainability or climate change or anything. It's just about, hey, do you want to save $200 on your energy cost this year? Oh yeah, please. All right, I'll give you a few things to do. But I could not agree with you more, and I think it's great what My Climate does, but we need to do that at a larger scale. So Bob, yes, you're definitely an enthusiast, you're an advocate in this topic, but I think AJL wants to support that and do a lot more. And I think the three of us could actually take quite a bit of initiative in building webinars and educational platforms to make this even widely understood. What are your thoughts on that, Bob? And how can we be? How much can we play a more active role in that?
Yeah. Thanks. Just to pick up on something Stephen said about the potato chips, I have a similar expression that I use about this journey of being more environmentally friendly. And I do repeat, you know, it's not about being perfect. We're all trying to improve. We're all on a journey. We're all continually learning things. But I think of it like an addiction. It's like a drug, because you do some little things because you know it's the right thing to do. You talk about it, you put it on your website, your guest sees it, they review it, they comment about it in a review, they refer somebody to you. It's a virtuous circle, because you see that you're getting some great results coming from taking some very simple initiatives, you know, like not having plastic or having green energy supply. And then you see that it hits your bottom line, and you're actually making more money because more people are coming to stay, you're being referred, you get some press out of it. And so it's a virtuous circle. So then you go, oh yeah, let's do some more of that. Let's have some more potato chips, or let's have some more of whatever it is that you're consuming. And it does become addictive. But it's a great addiction, because you know you're doing good for yourself, you're doing good for your guests, and you're doing good for the planet. So it's a really healthy addiction. And to pick up on your point, Simon, your question, absolutely, there's things that we could do together, and that would be fantastic. In fact, I've got a proposal that I'm just about to send out to a few people in the vacation mental space, and perhaps I'll include you in that and ask for your comments, and you as well, Stephen, and see what you think. It's about to go out, so watch this space. But certainly, we need to be educating people. And it's not about bullying them. It's not about coercing them. It's about letting them see that it's the right thing to do, but also it's going to be good for their business, because people, you know, don't want to just take the medicine because it's the thing they have to do. We need to also educate them that it's also going to be good for their business, and they are going to see that increasing demand as people more and more are starting to understand that they're doing things in their day-to-day lives that are greener. So when they go on vacation, why wouldn't they want to continue that as well? Why would they just throw out all those ideas and those morals when they go on holiday? They're not going to. And so hosts and property managers need to start to understand that this is the way it's going, and it's going to increase really quickly. And please get on the bandwagon and do the right thing, because that is only going to be great for your business too.
Thank you, Bob, for this closing plaidoyer. I need to be mindful of time, but I obviously, it's fantastic. It's like taking a virtual drug. I take that away. Eating chips, you can't stop. You can make an impact. It's a beautiful way of closing that. Maybe to Stephen, can you give us a closing word on this topic and give us your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I always say everything's already here. It's all here. The solutions are here. Everything's here. We don't have to reinvent the world. And I think what you could look at the best practices. What is maybe your neighbor doing, or the other person? I said, well, I could do that as well. And I think that's where the networking comes in. Look at the best practices, and it's not rocket science. And the second thing, what I would say as well, we're starting on the right way, but we've got to stay very vigilant, very, very vigilant. That we make the right the decisions, that people stay on the bandwagon, join the bandwagon, and that it really becomes a movement that go beyond just tourism, but other aspects as well. But what I hear as well, and some of the ideas that I've seen popping up in the tourism business, I mean, now in the meantime, destination management, you have to have a sustainability plan. And that includes everything, not just the hotels, the vacation rentals, but it includes the grocery shop, everything else, that it's an integral part. And that makes me very, very optimistic.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to have a sustainability plan. End of story. And together we can do more. I want to thank Bob and Stephen for joining Red Shoes Talks today. We could have gone on for a lot longer. We can see it's a topic that is present every day. I think we have seen it with the natural disasters we're facing. Things are literally changing in our own generation. We can see how things have changed. When I was a child, I always celebrated my birthday in the snow. That hasn't happened since 30 years. I don't need a climate report. I feel it myself, and we're all responsible to do something for it. So thank you, Bob and Stephen, for joining this Red Shoes Talks. We will beat the drum, continue to do so, to better we can do more for this industry and for the world in itself. Thank you so much.